Hello and welcome to KJ's Crash Course. I am KJ here bringing you exercise 3 bonus. You may have looked at the first bonus already, or the other bonus video rather, excuse me, on how to speed up the automation. And in this bonus exercise, we're actually going to complete the RPA challenge once again, but instead of using Excel-based activities, we are going to just use system activities instead. There are two additional activities that we are adding to our vocabulary, so to speak. One is called read range, the other is for each row in a data table. Reason being is that sometimes when you are just grabbing data, we can actually store data sets into a data table variable. Now, I know we've covered a variable before, so I'm going to show you how to use a system activity to pull that into memory in a data table variable, and then use that data table variable to complete the same thing. So we will not be using any Excel activities in this exercise. You totally can. However, I think it's just good to know because we are going to write a VB expression to iterate through the data table and input the data instead of needing to use the Excel activities in the dropdown. So this is a little bit more coding focused. However, I think it's important to understand as you try to develop your automations and get a little bit cleaner and faster as you build them. I think, and the expression we're going to write is very, very simple. I'm going to walk us through all of it, and then we will or with that rather, let's get started on building this thing. So we have the RPA Challenge website. We know we need to have the Excel downloaded. I believe I still have it sitting in my downloads somewhere. Let's just make sure. Pull this over, downloads, and I have challenge. So right there, we're going to use that throughout the automation, which is perfect. So if you want to go ahead, click Start Process. I'm going to call this RPA Challenge Exercise 3 Bonus VB expressions. You can call it whatever you want, just something that you would want to know to be able to reference at a later point. The reason we did not copy over the other activities, while we could pull in all the other type intos, I feel like just building this one from scratch makes a little more sense. It's a little bit cleaner. You won't have to worry about copy and pasting anything. Like I said, you can feel free to go ahead, grab a prior exercise and copy it, but I figured start it from scratch with this one made sense because it is pretty easy. Instead of using Excel activities, so I'm just editing a description, you don't have to. We are going to use system activities and use VB instead to iterate through the data table. Cool. Awesome. So once you've got that, right, click create. And once this loads, we will get started here. Okay, this has loaded accordingly, so let's get started here. So if you remember the RPA challenge, we take data from that Excel, and then within that Excel, let's just have this open. I'm going to use challenge 1, but I'll have another file that's different so I can look at it while I'm opening this. So great, cool. And it'll be important as we do some ways to iterate through the data table. Okay, so we have that open. We need to take data from that Excel, click start, and then start the automation. Okay, but no matter what, we're going to do the same activity before. We are going to use a use application/browser, pull that in, and then we have to tell the robot, okay, what application are we trying to automate? It is Chrome, right, or Edge, or whatever you're using, right? And then we pull that in. I'm going to leave everything as is. I'm going to change the close parameter to never, so I'm just going to run it from a clean screen instead of having it open every time, which is why I'm changing that to close, because by default, it will close at the end of the automation. Okay. And then from that, first step is always click that start button, right? So we're going to click that start button. And then we need to get that data from that Excel, okay? Now before you might think, oh, let's go to Excel, right? Then pull in the use Excel file like we did before. There is also this activity called read range, which I think is super, super important. We could pull in a read range and store data in a data table variable using the Excel activities. However, if you know it's a workbook format, think Excel or CSV, you can actually pull it out without even needing to use the Excel activities at all. So you can see right here, system file workbook read range workbook. If we pull that in inside this do block and we give it a workbook path, which is searching for it, our challenge data, and then the sheet name, right? Remember how we can just, use that? We can keep the sheet name. What's the sheet name? well, sheet 1. Remember, it's got to be in quotes, and then you can see that it's in quotes right there too. And then range, we could specify the full range. We could do A1 to G11. So we could do this if we wanted to. So A1 colon G11, or if you want to pull the full data, you can also just as easily use a double quotes and leave that there. Okay, so super, super cool little way to do that. And then as you'll notice, there is an output here for data table. We did cover the properties pane before. So if you haven't been familiar with the properties pane, feel free to go ahead and take the other bonus exercise where we actually edit parameters specifically to make the automation faster. We are going to actually store our data in a variable, and we're going to use the shortcut to do it. If we recall exercise 1, it's Control K, and then best practice, describe what it is. You could type data table out. I just use DT for short, and I'll call this challenge data. You want to at least explain what the type of variable it is and then what it is, or you can flip that. Honestly, it's going to be by wherever you want. If you get down a path from a development perspective, there's going to be best practices that are going to be told to you on how to do this. Okay, so once you type that in, click enter, and you'll see that this variable pops up inside of our variables pane. I'm going to change the scope to main sequence, but you can leave it as do for this exercise as well, just showing you multiple things you can do to get the same result. Okay, so if we look at it, we told the robot to open up this page. We said click start, and then we're reading the data directly from that workbook. There is also an add headers parameter as well here in the properties pane. Make sure you have that checked. If you don't have it checked, that's okay. It's just going to iterate the first row of data instead, which won't give you the 100% completion that you need, but it would still complete the exercise from a feasibility standpoint. Okay. So then right here we click start, we get the data, and then instead of for each Excel row, if we search for each, here's all of the for eaches that we have. So here's all the loops that we have. So for each Excel row, for each Excel sheet, exercise 4, we're actually going to go to for each email, file in a folder, folder in a folder, each UI element. This gets a little, this for eaches is really good when you're iterating through some matches. I actually could use that down the line. We covered that a little bit in exercise 5's bonus. I digress there. But the one we actually want is, as you notice, for each row in a data table. So that's the one we're actually going to use because we have a data table variable. So why not use the specific activity for each row in a data table? So we pull that in, and then you'll see for each current row in the VB expression is the variable. Okay, so that's what it is. So we're going to type in what we had before. You just start typing it, double click, and there you go. What's really cool is that what this for each is doing is creating what we call a localized variable specific for this loop. Okay, so we could, this is how you define an object. So if you actually follow any other coding languages, you are going to define what your objects are in the beginning of the script, and then you're going to use them throughout, where you might say like object object name equals this or whatever, which means it's always going to be that value moving forward. Okay, so this is the same type of concept, right? We could put anything here. We could put potato here if we wanted to. Okay, and for each potato in this, I like leaving it as current row or just row because we are just iterating through every row in a data table, but just know we could change that. And I'll show you a quick example of how we'll do that in the first type into, but just know this is creating a localized variable inside of our specific variable to assign a value based on the column header, just like we did in the Excel. I know that gets a little cumbersome, which is why this is a bonus exercise, but just understand you're just using coding to pull the value out instead of the integrated Excel activity that you saw before. Okay, that's about it. So now that we have our start, our read range, and for each row in a data table, let's do the same thing we did before. We're going to pull in a type into. It's going to ask you to indicate in Chrome because we only have one application that we've been interacting with. And you're just going to go choose your first name. Do the same thing here. And if you remember in the Excel activities, we'd hit plus, it would have, the Excel current row, and then it would pull it down. And you might have noticed it gave us a little bit of coding there. We're going to just do the same thing and write a different expression. You're just going to do it manually instead of using a tool to write it for you. So what we do is we need to define what we're iterating through, okay? So this is what we're going to send in our type this field, or put in our type this field, okay? So current row, now remember, we could have this be potato. So if I change this here, and you saw how it popped up, if I go here, you see how it pops up. Right, actually, let me go back here. So you see how this actually, there we go. So you see how that actually pops up? That's what I mean. You can put anything there that you want, which is super cool. But let's change that back to current row. Right, current row. So in the current row, we are pulling a specific item, right? Because we want the first name. And then there's two ways we can do this. So as you can see, property, data row, which is the row, we want an item, and then the column name as a string. Well, what column name do we want? Well, we want first name. So we can copy that here, or you can type it in. Camel case is important, right? So every single space and whatever needs to be there. So you're going to put this in quotation marks. And then best practice is to convert this to a string. It'll pull automatically for you, but convert it to a string because we are typing into a string-based field. And then also a best practice is to put a trim, so that way we make sure that we are getting the full result. So if we read this, I know it's a coding expression, but I guarantee it's not that difficult if we walk through it again. In the current row, for each row in a data table, right? Because we are looking for each row of data, we need to input all of these fields. So in the current row, which is this row right here, we want the item that is first name, and we're converting it to a string, and then we're adding a trim function at the end to trim off any white spaces that might exist in the field, okay? That right there is pretty much the same expression you'll use, I would say 9 times out of 10, whenever you're iterating through data. Obviously, the easy way is have the data in an Excel, right? And then once that data is in Excel, use the Excel-based activities. However, as you feel more comfortable, this is a nice, faster way to achieve the same result, okay? This is super awesome, right? And just repeat that for every field on the screen. So we can do this for last name, right? So right here on the same token, we can also, right, instead of using the column header, we can also use what we call an index, okay? Now, if any of you have used a VLOOKUP before in Excel, you'll understand this. If you haven't, it's okay. Indexing means instead of using the column header, we can just use the column number. So A in UiPath land would be 0, B would be 1, C would be 2, right? So indexing starts at 0. So if we wanted to input the first name, instead of it being current row item first name, it'd be current row item 0, okay? Last name would be current row item 1, right? So if we wanted to continue that, that would be 1. And you can use the index. This is really helpful if you don't necessarily know what the column header is going to be, or if it doesn't have a header. Sometimes exports don't come with a header. So if it doesn't have the header, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to have to probably use the index or create one, right? You get the idea. So if we follow this along, right, type in the last name, what's the next one? Company name. Company name would be index of 2, all right? And you can just follow that. So just feel free to go ahead, use a combination of this if you want, keep using the index numbers if you want, or column headers. Both will work, whatever you decide, so long as you get the results that you are looking for at the end in order to obviously complete the RPA challenge. That is what we are looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this and run it. And then hopefully we get that 100% at the close of this. Oh, what is going on? And then we will go from there. All right, and then we're finalizing the activity here with the click. Make sure it's inside of that for each the do block inside of the for each row. And there we are. That is the RPA challenge using read range and for each row in a data table. Assuming you have completed that properly, I'm going to close this down. Remember, if you do have it closed down, be sure to change that close parameter in the properties pane to never, so that way it stays open. And if you've done everything successfully after this compiles, which for whatever reason it's taking mine forever, I hope you're not experiencing the same thing, you should get it 100%. And if you want to speed it up, just like we did in the previous bonus, if you decided to take that one, I'll close that down as well. If you decided to take that one where we edit parameters accordingly, you should be good to go. So let's just make sure this works here. There we go. It's loaded. Rearrange, click start, and finding our fields, and there we go. It's inputting everything accordingly. I could go ahead and speed this up, but I have a feeling if we just input that data, we are going to be good. That is the completion of the RPA challenge again. Once again, let it run through, see if you get your 100%, and you should be all set. Congratulations on learning the bonus with read range and for each row and learning a VB expression. I hope to see you taking either the other bonus exercise or moving on to exercise 4, where we actually read the Excel from an email and we interact with that accordingly. This is KJ signing off, and I will see y'all in the next lesson. Cheers, guys.